welcome to the UIC's Liberty TV, your Friday morning must view. I'm your host, Winston Wright, Vice President of the UIC Cornwall region. My usual co host, Mr. Joseph Patterson, our president, is not here with us today, so I'm your host and your guide to the UIC for this morning. There's a host of issues to discuss this morning, and I wanted us to revisit the Rio Bueno, the Dry Harbor Mountain issue. We were supposed to have a member from the St. Anne Environmental Association with us. We're hoping that person can join us later in the broadcast. I'll be with you from for about 45 minutes to just get you informed as to what UIC is doing in its activism to bring about that social and political change Jamaica so desperately needs. And of course, with the events of the past week and events of the past 4 years and beyond have shown that that change is well needed. And UIC stands ready to do that for you. UIC being a member, that being a creature of the neocolonialism that exists, not being a creature of the plantocracy that usually exists on this island, is poisoned in the perfect place, has the perfect vantage to guide you to your political destination. So let's, for those who are just joining us, again, welcome to UIC Liberty TV, where you get to view the offerings of the UIC. And just to catch you up on the UIC is Jamaica's third registered political party. We're a political movement that believes strongly in Black Jamaican economic empowerment, believe in personal liberty, and that you should have the potential to earn, live, and most importantly, retire in dignity, exist in an environment of commerce, open, free commerce that is free from fraud or force, and most importantly, governmental interference or overreach. So, if you believe that your personal freedoms are at stake, especially in these times, please go on our website, www.uicjamaica.com, look at our platform, look at our constitution, and see how the UIC plans to help you. UIC has a complete roadmap for the transformation of Jamaica's political landscape to move Jamaica from the current Westminster system of governance to a non-partisan constitutional republic. And that is the difference. You'll always hear people, especially in the political sphere, talk about Jamaica becoming a republic. But what they have not said is a non-partisan constitutional republic, because they are only paying lip service to the issue. They're only paying superficial, um, you know, attention to the matter that is so important. But go on the UIC website, join us on our social media pages, like us, follow us, and you will learn a lot as we take you through the process over the next couple of years as UIC prepare to be your government. Now, we'll talk some more about UIC in a bit, but let me take you to the current topical issues that we want to discuss this morning. First is the revisit the Dry Harbor Mountain issue, and it continues to dominate the airwaves with several persons speaking on it. The Prime Minister took a very dismissive tone when the issue was brought up, and the very opaque, very shady way in which this reversal took place. While there is no evidence implicating the government in any wrongdoing, and to be fair, the minister is vested with that authority to undertake that reversal. The ill advised manner under which it was done, revising or repealing the ruling of a technical government agency so installed to guide the government in these matters, smacks of some sort of duplicity. So we want to make sure that the government is held accountable to understand that that 27% that voted for them did not give them the majority to act in the manner they so choose. As a matter of fact, it's representative of a fraction of Jamaica's population. Therefore, they should tread lightly. Their response to the issue, the government's response to the issue, has triggered backlash, especially from the youth. What we have had coming out of it is a very strong coalition of youths. For example, we have members of Girls Care, Young People for Action on Climate Change Jamaica, Caribbean Youth Environment Network, Jamaica chapter, Mitigation and Adoption of Climate Change Group, UISTAT Vice Chancellors, Ambassadors, Youth Change Activists, Jamaica Environmental Entrepreneur Advocacy Network, and the Youth for Puerto Bueno movement. There's a lot of people telling the government that their actions are ill advised. But what has brought us to this point? In the heyday of bauxite, Jamaica, through political directorate that existed at the time, was ranked seventh in the world in bauxite export through the succeeding decade. And as Jamaica did a lot to revolutionize the bauxite industry. For example, as I mentioned last week, the International Bauxite Association, Jamaica was pivotal in the creation of that association and the turn that took control of the bauxite industry from these multinational companies that were running it at the time. Now, with Jamaica being ranked seventh, as you can imagine, we were hauling in a lot of bauxite. As a matter of fact, in 2008, Jamaica pulled out of the ground crude bauxite at about 4,429,000 tons, just about. And we were able to refine that into alumina, which is not the final product, as I said last week, but the second stage of the final product, which netted just about 4 million tons. And actual ore that was taken out of the ground, that's the soil impurities, all that stuff was over 10 million tons. Now, as you can imagine, on the world market, with the demand for aluminum, especially in the aviation industry, that was high. So that's a lot of money Jamaica was earning from this industry. Why haven't we benefited from it? It goes back to what the UIC has always said as our governance structure. And we see that they invest vast amount of power in our political leaders, which they in turn abuse and use for their own selfish and political gains. So these monies never made it to the public coffers in a meaningful way, was never used to do anything because we were caught in a cycle of master slave economics. Jamaica's independence had little to sustain itself, so we were forced to borrow from those same multinational lending agencies that were the colonial banks that bankrolled slavery that got us here in the first place. So those high interest rates and steep repayment terms, which continue to today, has landed us with a $2 trillion debt, with government using their deficit spending policy, which means they can borrow unlimited, which they have borrowed up to $2 trillion worth. They can borrow without impunity because they can tax us without impunity, and they can plunder our natural resource just the same. Now, the government, the present government, and their past administrations have strategically moved the boundaries of the cockpit country because the last bauxite reserves, because bauxite is a dwindling industry, and the extraction industry is very limited in its sustainability. So the government has moved the boundaries of the cockpit country to allow them to get at these reserves. And in so doing, they're encroaching on very protected lands. These lands are watershed areas because, as you can imagine, if you look at the map of Jamaica, you will see that most of our rivers, except one, runs from these highlands down, especially the major rivers, down to the plains. Right? Now, when the Cockpit Country and the Blue Mountain Range are all known watershed areas, which means that they feed these rivers. Okay. Now, Jamaica being an island surrounded by water, salt water, these rivers are very important to our water supply and water security. And we hear the NWC during the summers cry from time to time about limited water resource. So, what do you think will happen when there's a mining operation that silts these underground water aquifers that feeds into these rivers and therefore make it turbid and unable to be processed for use, which introduce trace elements or heavy metals into these water supplies accidentally or deliberately? And that $4 million bond that these companies are supposed to put up as environmental bonds to repair damage will not be worth a red cent. It will not help to restore those balance that we have disturbed. The biodiversity that exists there, that geologists, environmental economists, and a host of professionals have been crying about over the past week would have been destroyed. For example, the endangered Jamaica boa is known to have a home in these mountains. And with the need to keep carbon emissions low, the loss of rainforest cover is one of the leading cause of the greenhouse effect. And also it plays a very, these tree covers, as we know from basic science, play a very, very important role in our water cycle. When we look at the rolling hills in Jamaica and see the thick fog cover in the evenings rolling through, that's moisture that's been lifted from the trees as they respire, and that later falls as rain in another region. So mining in these areas is a very dangerous, precarious thing. As I said, it tantamount to tearing your house down to get that short-term benefit. Now, what are the solutions? And what would the UIC do if it was in this position? UIC is against the extraction industry, basically in Jamaica because of how limited the sustainability of it is and how long-term the damage that it presents is. Now, in this particular instance, where the land is held by a private individual and the UIC is strong and protected an individual right, so the UIC would not be looking to force the owners into giving up the lands or walking away from the plan, but to work with them to incentivize them to choose a more sustainable form of development for the land. We would even consider acquiring these lands from these developers, and then, as we have asked the government to do, as we have demanded of the government in our press release to the government, use our legislative powers to protect these regions. And persons like the coalition that has written to the government, Girls Care, etc., they make the same demands that these areas should be further protected. The boundaries which the government had rescinded, remarked, pushed back to make the protected areas smaller should be brought back to its original points. And these are all very strong points to protect these areas from exploitation and in the long term protect the island, its biodiversity, and our general health and the health of the planet Earth in general. So this is the issue that cuts to the heart of who we are, an island nation, a land of wood and water. So if we continue to cut the wood down and pollute our waters, then we'll just be a land, and land is very finite. UIC believes that our protection of Jamaica and the environment is not just a short term political objective or a political objective, period. It is a goal that transcends generational issues that we should focus in the extended long term on. That is why the UIC believe in principles such as high density housing and reducing the urban sprawl. Right now, there's a trend in Jamaica where the government, for expedience, allow sprawls of housing on very arable land which can be properly utilized to increase our food security in the coming years. The Jamaica Agricultural Society and the Ministry of Agriculture is saying right now there's food shortage. There's an expected food shortage for the Christmas holidays. This is a synopsis of the future. So we should be looking to create stronger food security, and in doing so, we need better agricultural practice, and a system of agriculture that reduces the level of subsistence farming, but increase the level of commercial farming, whether through cooperative movements or through community movements. That is what the UIC believe in. So reducing the urban sprawl and increasing arable land, making it available for agriculture is one of the best ways to do that. And this is something that the UIC believes in. So the environmental issue not only stops at mining, it goes beyond that. It speaks to how we live going into the future, how we produce, and how we feed ourselves. So piecemeal approach to agriculture, environmental issue, and sustainability on a whole needs a change. We need to look at it in a holistic way, look at it as it relates to other facets of our lives or existence in Jamaica and in the world, and work in a sensible way to bring all things together instead of looking at the short term gains. Now, the government can't do any better because they have wasted billions, trillions of dollars that should have been going into development of the island and development of our infrastructure and improving our lives. So now they are pressed for time and they are pressed for money to fuel their political ambitions, brings me to the point that the UIC again wants to be Jamaican non-constitutional republic. And how do we do that? By removing big money that backs our politics. And if we look at the previous election that was held, we see banks donating well over $10 million, and that's one individual bank with several based on by Italy alone, there was over $30 billion donated just to one party. Right? And that's just what we're able to account for based on public reporting. So UIC wants to remove big money backing from politics. We want to make it an informative action by members of the public, by the politicians who are putting themselves up for service. And this is pretty simple. It's a straightforward formula that UIC has. When a candidate is nominated, he's nominated in his community by his community to represent them, the varying groups. This candidate will be given access to the same tools as all other candidates, the same airtime on the public airwaves, the same media to express himself, to voice his mandate, and to interface with the persons without his party spending large sums, billions of dollars to influence the elections, whether unscrupulously or by traditional means. This candidate will be solely responsible for bringing himself to the people and representing what he intends to do for the people and be held accountable for it. So there won't be any big money, any candidate who gets big money, spend it on their campaign, and then they're beholden to a large corporation who has duplicitous intentions, or to an individual with big money who wants to take control of our government. So UIC will eliminate that from our political landscape and make it a level playing field. In addition to that, you'll hear people talk about the topical issue of removing the Queen. The UIC is the only party that has not embraced it as a political football and use it as will, at will, sorry. But it is a part of our platform, a part of our manifesto, a pledge to the Jamaican people from the inception of the UIC. And we realize that this is important not only for symbolism, but as a part of the reform to bring Jamaica out of a political system which was donated to us, which was foisted on us by our political, our plantocracy. So for Jamaicans, the UIC intend to be the party of the people, from the people. And we will work in a sustainable way, in a manageable way, with persons who are subject matter experts, who their job is to guide the people, guide the UIC in representing the people at all levels, and slowly build a safe and orderly Jamaica where all can work in peace, be free from force or fraud, and be free to retire in peace and enjoy their hard earnings. Now, again, if you're seeing us for the first time, welcome to the UIC Liberty TV. UIC is Jamaica's third registered party, a political movement that believes in individual liberty, believes in economic empowerment for every Jamaican, not just a few, by opening up opportunities across the island, by removing bureaucratic red tape, governmental overreach, making it easy for you to conduct commerce across the world, not just in Jamaica, and be free to earn and trade without government being a gatekeeper or a big brother, limiting the size of government, the reach of government, the scope of government, and most importantly, the ability of government to tax you beyond their means, and most important, and second important, to spend beyond their means because they have unlimited access to tax you of your hard-earned money. Now, we hear the government talk again, and this is another classic overreach, which they have not looked at the matter in a holistic way. The floodings recently, where tragically persons lost their lives, especially in Shooters Hill, due to a landslide, and condolences to those families. And the government jump on that to politicize it to say, oh, we're going to create no bill zones. And I hear groups that are supposed to be well informed and dispassionate, saying, oh, yes, the government should, but allow us to look at this in a rational way. In the beginning, and I do say in the beginning, as in when the slaves were set free from the plantation, the swathes of arable lands, of fruit bearing lands, proper agricultural lands were owned by the plantocracy. And our foreparents did not have any choice but to run to the hills, the very steep hills, for many reasons. One, they wanted to get away from the system that currently exists that had them downtrodden for well over 400 years. And also, they wanted something for themselves to be able to cleave a living on this little island. And they occupied a swatch of land on the hill. Now, persons are living in areas that the government believes are no build zones. And I can understand the belief that these areas should not be built in, especially if it has the potential to pollute rivers, etc. And with our solid waste management practices being so poor, not because persons are not cleanly, but because the infrastructure for it, which government is rightfully responsible for, is so poorly managed. I can understand them not wanting persons to build. But throughout the world, whether you want to look at a place like California, whether you want to look at China, whether you want to look at France, Portugal, persons have always built on slopes, undulating lands, cliffs, but they have done it successfully with one key feature: engineering, technology that shows how to maintain slopes, how to prevent erosion. If we can build islands out of the sea, why aren't we able to create a sustainable way to build in these areas? Because these are the only lands these people have hold or can afford to hold. Instead of saying you will dispossess them and then use public funds to reacquire lands for them, there is a much more cost effective and simple way of dealing with it by bringing proper engineering, proper town planning to bear on this issue, instead of politicizing it and then frightening persons into getting acquainted, accepting the fact that they will be dispossessed of the little swatch of hillside land that they own. The government is, again, myopic in its views and how to deal with various issues, and typically reacts in a knee jerk and tyrannical way. And we should be careful of that because of the vast power invested in, especially our prime minister. They need to look in a responsible way at the reasons why Jamaicans are in certain positions, which is usually largely due to their mismanagement of the economy, their poor handling of development strategies, and most importantly, the waste of resources that should have improved the lives of Jamaica. So, in this regard, I'm saying to the Prime Minister and to the government and to the people of Jamaica, there's a simpler way to address these issues. So, let's sit back dispassionately, let technologically savvy persons, let persons with knowledge of the industry, let persons with knowledge of the subject area go to work and craft that solution for us instead of politicizing it for our benefit, to have us believe that government is working when they're actually overreaching and pushing us further to the brink. Now, life in Jamaica can be beautiful, can be lovely, but the government needs to be responsible, needs to step away from its follies. I mean, if you look at the Mandela Highway development, the government touted it as a masterpiece, a showcase of what they're able to do. But this is with borrowed money. It's not with national money invested. I know countries who have invested the country's earnings into developing these national assets, these national infrastructures, and not borrow as much as we do. But the horse is through the gate and the monies were borrowed. Now, the government said that they transformed Kingston with this piece of development. But when you look at it, now every time it rains, these pieces of development flood. And you wonder why? How can this showpiece of the government development be so poorly managed? It's because of the politicization of agencies such as the National Work Agency. When you look at their track record, the NWA has a very poor track record of creating sustainable public infrastructure because of this politicization. We need to move away from that and allow these agencies to perform the way they can and the way they should. When you look at Marcus Garvey Drive or the Mandela Highway, you see surface drains. But then when you look at the geography of the area, you wonder if this will be adequate. On one side of Mandela, there's a massive swamp. On the other side, there's a massive cane field. All these areas are water holding areas. One section of the road, one lane of the road was raised. Why wasn't the rest of the road raised to that level? You follow? These are the kind of developmental mistake for expedience, and it's not even a mistake because we end up wasting our money through political cronyism. We have to take shortcuts. Contractors were in the news recently complaining bitterly about the kind of things they're forced to do by government when they undertake these contracts to build these pieces of infrastructure. And they know it will fail, it won't work, and yet they are forced to do it. And of course, when you couple that with the poor maintenance, something as simple as clear cutting a piece of road to keep water and shade off the road, because we build road with asphalt which melts and congeals. So it melts at high temperature, congeals at low temperatures. To get it to be more sustainable, we need to keep it at a high temperature so it's not susceptible to water. Clear cut the roads, clear the drains so the water runs off. When you build a road, instead of leaving the road flat for the water to run on it, why not crown the road to one side or to both sides? We all know the properties of water. Water is incompressible. So it acts as a drill when you try to compress it. That's how we create potholes. And Jamaica has been referred to these days as the pothole paradise. It's a very sad reality that we have to face. We're forced to buy these imported vehicles, these used imported vehicles at exorbitant cost because of the government tax regime and business practices, but yet they do not last because of the conditions of our roads. And our roads can be maintained because in the past, on that different management system of public infrastructure, the roads were being maintained at a better standard. The present system that was created to make things more efficient has turned out to be a farce and a complete failure. The government has refused to acknowledge that because they're able to exploit the present system for their own gains, whether through preferential contracts to different people or other means, or work to persons who are unfit or even unskilled. We need to look at a national centric way of doing business. We need to be putting Jamaica first when we are vested with certain authority. And that is not happening. We're putting party ourselves over the national interest. And that unpatriotic way of living is bringing us to the inevitable precipice which we are now standing on. We need to retake Jamaica, and the UIC, who sees this and knows what needs to be done, is asking you to put your faith in us, asking you to be informed as to what the UIC can and will do for you to make Jamaica that place to live, that place to work, that place to retire with dignity. Not a place where you face victimization at the hands of criminals because of lawlessness, because persons don't see an example being set, where the white collar criminals get away with it because they're politically connected or they have money, but where justice is a uniform force of good that touches everyone equally, where the government doesn't use the legal resources available to it to victimize or bully the country into subjugation, but is understanding of the fact that it represents and reports to the people, be it on a 4-year basis, but they do report to the people. And the UIC will create a governmental system that is now responsive to the people, where the government leader of the government don't stand at a podium, deliver a scathing speech about his critic, and then say he will do nothing about it and turn his back. It is more responsive. Our system puts a senator in every constituency, and he is responsible to the people. He's required to have regular meetings with the people, and the people decide whether or not he stays in office. There'll be a system of recall, not just an election day where you face the test, but a system of recall, because if you are not performing as a UIC member representing a particular constituency, the people can, will, and have the right to remove you from office in a legally acceptable way. That is what Jamaica needs to move forward. Not a place where educated young people come home, apply for a job, only to get a call to say, we're not going to hire you, but yet they see the ad still running in the paper. Or turn up to find out that the job was filled by somebody's relative who is connected, or be told that I have your application, it looks good, but I'm going to run the ad again, so you need to apply. These are the complaints from our young professionals or young educated persons returning from intense study, even at the PhD level. This cannot be sustainable for a country looking to grow. As a matter of fact, Jamaica this old, at this age, should not be looking to grow. Look at Singapore. Our president often refers to Singapore. And when I learned of it and looked at the Singapore model, I learned that the government of Singapore at the time of independence came to Jamaica to study the Jamaican model that was being implemented and used that to turn Singapore into a disciplined first world country. Why couldn't Jamaica have done that? Simple. Because the tribal politics we inherited from our colonial masters pit the two parties against each other, split the country into two tribes where we can't agree because there is no difference, no one to split the difference, and we constantly fight against each other. And as a former prime minister said, it's a perpetual battle, one hostile tribe against another for the scarce benefits and spoils. That should not be the case. And it's a sad, disappointing, if not heartbreaking thing for our political leaders to opine in that manner after they have left office, after they have contributed to the degradation of our national pride. Jamaica, it's time to understand who we are. It's past time that we stand up. It's past time that we get off the fences. It's past time that we create the change that we want to see, not wait for the change to come to us. In the past, it took one person to ferment rebellion that brought the change and gave us our freedoms. Will you be that change? The UIC has offered itself. Myself as vice president, Mr. Joseph Patterson as president, Mr. Devon Thompson as vice president, Mrs. Pauline McKenzie as vice president, and others in the UIC are standing by to be that change for you. Because we know Jamaica deserves better. And development is just a simple concept, straightforward. It is not as complex as the government make it seems. Yes, there are complex mathematics equations, complex accounting equations involved, but it's a simple plan that requires only the will of execution. Now, if you're just joining us, thank you for joining me on UIC TV. This is UIC Liberty TV, where we try to inform you on the topical issues of the day while bringing the UIC's perspective. And what is the UIC, you may ask? The UIC, the United Independence Congress, is Jamaica's third registered party, a grassroots movement who believes strongly in personal liberties, who believe in the individual right to earn, to enjoy property, to retire in dignity, an individual right to life, etc. UIC aims to be Jamaica's government to usher in the age of change where it makes Jamaica a non-constitutional republic. What that means, the UIC in its manifesto promises to remove the Queen as head of state, reform the constitution to remove the political influence and big money donor influence from our political system and allow candidates to interface with their constituents on a more personal basis, be representative of the people and be reporting to the people and be held accountable by the people for their political action, their political decisions, and be subject to the people's action if they fail in their promise or undertaking. We look forward to having you with us. And if you're on social media, we'll ask you to join us on Facebook, join us on Twitter, Instagram, and watch our channel on YouTube. We enjoy being here, share these information with you about the issues of the day. And we ask you to again like, subscribe, join us, join the discussion on our Facebook page. And we look forward to working with you. Now, I have a lot of coming in from persons, and I'll try to get to some of them. And it's. I wish Mr. Patterson was here to share with us in his usual eloquent way. Because I see a couple very strong questions coming in about the sustainability of mining, for example. And I went into it earlier by saying that if we look at the mineral industry throughout the world, we realize that while the demands are going up because mineral like what Jamaica is rich in, alumina, is a non-renewable resource, meaning when it runs out, it runs out. That industry is not sustainable. So we have to look at other ways. Unfortunately, our government has only been looking to tourism. And when you look at our tourism product compared to other islands, I've been to other islands and our tourism product pale in comparison. But Jamaica has a brand, a draw, and it's that draw that you're trying to capitalize on. But in doing that, we should build out our product. And just speaking of tourism, I see the Jamaican tourism product getting awards and accolades, and I often wonder why. The North Coast Strip is my stomping grounds. I've traveled the length and breadth of it for the past 28 years, and I've seen changes, but never development that awes me. In Montego Bay, on the so-called hip strip, wastewater runs like a pool, like a river. The hotels are mainly focused on the North American or the European visitor. It's only in recent times since the corona pandemic that you see a little trust to encourage local tourism. So our tourism product is severely lacking. And while we keep getting awards for having the best hotels or a good attraction in terms of our public infrastructure, the facade that we put forward, it is poor to the point of being third representative of our so-called quote unquote third world status. And this is disappointing. There isn't much being done other than by the TEF to create an image of well-being. While if you go to other tourism-centric areas, local tourism is heavily encouraged. There is expenditure on creating a pleasing facade that is welcoming to visitors and that presents a clean sanitary image of the country. That isn't happening here. So our priorities are skewed in the wrong way, which is what I'm saying. And the UIC again recognizes these ills, and we don't only criticize, we have solutions for these matters. The UIC is deliberate in seeking to put subject matter experts in place that will bring a new way of thinking, not political figureheads that has to pander to their diehard political base or their donors in ways that are unsustainable or even detrimental to the national interest, but in a meaningful way to bring development to the Jamaican landscape. Now, I'm heading off and ending broadcast for this Friday. I thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing with us. I ask you to like, share, and subscribe. Join the UIC. Look at the UIC page, www.uicjamaica.com. We'll be glad to have you. If you have any questions, our Facebook page is interactive. I'm really happy to answer your questions. So just like our page, share, whether it's a question or the contents of our page. We look forward to having you. And whether you're a UIC member or not, we look forward to your questions. And if you wish to participate, hop on our Facebook page, send us your question, whether it's from a previous broadcast or for an upcoming broadcast, and we'll be happy to answer your questions for you. UIC prides itself on being responsive to our public, our constituents, and we look forward to serving you. My name is Winston Wright, Vice President for the Cornwall region, and it was great being here with you this Friday. I look forward to next Friday when Mr. Patterson and I will take on topical issues share them with you, and share the UIC's perspective on Liberty TV. It's great being with you. Have yourself a wonderful day.